Guys, we got one more tonight. This is Stereolab with Emperor Tomato Ketchup. And the opening montage you heard Sibel's Reverie, and now you're going to hear Metronomic Underground. Emperor Tomato Ketchup by Stereolab comes in at number 189 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 20 in 1996, number 979 of all time. It's Stereolab's second highest rated album, behind 1997's Dots and Loops. Emperor Tomato Ketchup did not make Rolling Stone's list, and Stereolab is ranked as number 290 of overall artists on Best Ever Albums. So this is their fourth studio album. They have a total of 10 studio albums. Their most recent record was 2010's Not Music, but they have a ton of EPs. They have 17 EPs and 9 compilations of rarities and singles and tracks off of EPs. So they do, even though they only have 10 records, they do have a lot of output. Emperor Tomato Ketchup was released on March 18th, 1996. Genres include avant pop, post-rock, indie, electronic, indie pop. I don't know why it didn't say krautrock, maybe because they're not German, but I'm saying krautrock anyway because it certainly sounds like it. Influences include Brian Eno, The Velvet Underground, Burt Bacharach, Faust, Kraftwerk, Neu, Can, John Cage, and the Beach Boys. Josh, there you go. Beach Boys making another mention here. They influenced the Postal Service, Toro y Moi, and again, a bunch of bands I've never heard of.
Did you say Johnny Cage, by the way?
No.
Okay, from Mortal Kombat?
John Cage.
John Cage, okay.
Yeah, not Johnny Cage. The Mortal Kombat, Johnny Cage.
I was like, good for them for influencing Johnny Cage. But,
their highest charting album was 1997's Dots and Loops, that hit number 111 in the U.S., and the highest charting single was 1994's Ping Pong, which hit number 45 in the UK.
And we covered.
That's a single.
Yeah. That's a single. Okay, cool. Yeah, they seem to have more success in the UK than in the United States. Maybe that's because they were British, most of them anyway. But the band was formed in 1990 in London after the disbandment of a band by the name of McCarthy. In that band, McCarthy was a guy by the name of Tim Gain. And he was in McCarthy. And while he was in McCarthy, he met someone who would become his girlfriend, French singer Laetitia Sadier. And they also included a bassist by the name of Martin Keane. And then they brought in Gina Morris on backing vocals. So that was the original lineup of the band. But this is another band that's gone through tons of lineup changes, but I think it's fair to say that Tim Gain and Laetitia Sadier are the two main members throughout their tenure. They, right off the bat, they started a label called Duphonic Super 45s. And the initial intent was just to release multiple 7 and 10-inch records kind of every month, and that's kind of where they started just putting out some EPs. The first one being Super 45, released in 1991. And that was sold through mail order and the Rough Trade Shop in London. It was a very DIY project, and they felt that, being able to release their own work gave them a sense of freedom and an ability to explore different ideas that they might not have been able to do had they, been under a regular record contract and had to answer to the label. They released a second EP called Super Electric in 1991, and then their debut record, Pang, was released in 1992. Around that time, they received a record deal from Elektra Records off the strength of their 1993 EP, Space Age Bachelor Pad Music. They have great titles for their records I'm seeing here. And they continued to release albums and EPs, several EPs mostly, until they released Emperor Tomato Ketchup in 1996. And I thought it was interesting when they list the band members on this record. They basically just listed their names, and they said that they kind of were all responsible for all the instruments, including vocals and percussion, bass, guitar, Vox organs, synthesizers, electronics, things like that. But the band members for this record include Tim Gain, Letitia Sadir, Duncan Brown, Mary Hansen, Morgan Lote, and Andy Ramsey. And the album is named after the 1971 experimental film Emperor Tomato Ketchup by Japanese author and director Shuji Terayama. Josh, have you seen that film?
I have not, no.
Oh, well, maybe that will be on your list of 265 movies you see this year. So on this record, they focused many of their songs. It was kind of a little bit of a departure from their previous efforts because a lot of these songs were based on loops instead of traditional riffs. They'd actually, before coming to this record, they had experienced a decent amount of writer's block, and they were struggling to come up with ideas. But that kind of was broken by a project they worked on. They covered a song called ABC by a group called The Gods, which was an avant post-noise psychedelic band from New York City. And they found the process of trying to cover that song, which was basically kind of a free improvisation song. They found that kind of to be invigorating and, provided some inspiration for them to be able to start, writing songs for this record. And so that's kind of the story behind this album.
I gotta say, the description of this movie sounds great, so maybe I will check.
There you go. Put it on Letterboxd, Josh. They released a few more albums after this record. They built a studio in France in 2002. And around that time, actually, I forgot to mention this. I did say that Gain and Sadir had a romantic relationship. That came to an end in 2002, but they still continued on in the band together. Tragically, on December 9th, 2002, member Mary Hansen was killed when she was hit by a truck while she was riding her bicycle at the age of 36. And the band did consider, after several months, they considered disbanding, but they did decide to continue. They released some more work, went on hiatus in 2009 to pursue individual projects, and then announced a tour in 2019. And they're still around. They haven't done a record, as I said, since I think it was like 2010 was the last record that came out. But they're still around. You might be able to see them. And quite a different record. Not really something we've covered that sounded like this in a while. And let's start with Josh on your take of Emperor Tomato Ketchup.
Yeah, Stereolab's always, I know we covered the single before, but they're a band name that I always heard or referenced, but never listened to. And so I was interested to listen to it this week. And I gotta say, I really, really like this album. It's definitely the most pleasing sounding album this week. I really like the French pop name check that you cited, or genre, and the krautrock both definitely sprung to mind listening to this. I really like the kind of almost dance-like feel that some of these songs have, and I really just kind of like the brightness of this album, if that makes sense as a way to describe it. I really like all of the not influences. I really like all of the instruments that they use and the electronic sounds. Even if they're only using two different synths or keyboards or something, they must be using them in 50 different ways, because I felt like every song on here sounded different and was kind of maybe had some of the same vibes, but they just kind of, there was a lot of variety on the album that I really appreciated. It does have for people being English, it's remarkable how much it feels like they capture a French feel to it, and vibe. I really kind of like that 60s French pop, maybe more than I realized, especially in movies.
Well, keep in mind, Letitia Sadir is French.
Okay, so there's that influence, but you said a lot of them, and there's a rotating
I think
cast.
Everybody else is English, though.
Yeah,
yes,
so,
she's French.
Yeah, but it works really well. They also throw in a lot of different genres, elements of funk, and there's just some really good beats, and maybe some Brazilian music that we talked about way back when in the 60s. I feel like all those kind of elements are sprinkled in. I didn't really I thought, are the vocals in French? Because at times I felt like I could not understand what they were saying.
Yes, some of them
Like,
sometimes,
okay.
not always. Sometimes they are in
All
French.
right,
Yes.
yeah. So there's that. But that wasn't a barrier for me enjoying the music, and I am, yeah, I'm a fan of this. This is also a great album to like have. I feel like would have at like parties in the background and stuff. I think you can dial in and listen to it and enjoy it on that level, but you can also have it as like fun party music. So yeah, thumbs up for me. I'm a fan of Stereolab.
Yep, like as you mentioned, Matt, and it was not hard. Like you immediately, and I was not super familiar with Stereolab. We did ping pong, and I had a vague idea that they were electronic, right? I don't think I processed the French pop part of it. And we've done Serge Gainsbourg and Francois Hardy, and some of the artists in that area, and in some senses, they kind of do the same thing that like the band Ivy does, which also has a French lead singer and has an electronic vibe. But Ivy kind of stays a little bit more in like the lo-fi indie rock area, where this is a little bit more like truly electronic mixed with that French vibe. And yeah, I was definitely feeling this album. Where the krautrock comes in is that metronomic rhythm section, percussion feel to it, that there's a consistency to it that feels like it veers between very ordered beats in the background. And what is cool about that is usually the singing in the krautrock would be either similar to what was going on in the percussion, or would almost be sort of that, and this is not a krautrock band, but that like Devo thing where it was sort of like jarringly different in sort of like a higher pitched way, kind of, or like almost like robot way. This was like very much a feminine, like it's French, so it's got a little bit of like seductiveness to it, or wispiness, airiness to it, like over top of that metronomic sound, which was an interesting combo, and like I said, has some similarities with what Ivy was doing with indie rock, right, and the electronic feel with that. Josh, one thing I agree with you on is the fact that even though all of the songs have a similar underpinning, they're really, really good at doing tweaks and turns that make you not get bored with anything that they're doing. This was another long album that I had no problem with it being long, because there was it had a high replay ability for me. It's also the type of album, what's cool about it is you can listen to it either all the way through, or you can listen to it in like parts and pick it back up and feel like you kind of got the gist either way, which I really enjoyed about this. And yeah, it's I was I had a feeling both of you guys would really like this album. It operates in a very interesting space in electronic music, doesn't it? Because like a lot of like 90s electronic music is tied to hip hop, which this decidedly is not, or tied to like metal adjacent, right? Like the industrial stuff, or is like very synthetic. Like this is a very human version of the krautrock sound, which is kind of a cool vibe, right? Because the barrier, I think, for some, and even for me at times, like Neu and Faust, was that it was like robot, music, or like synthetic music, right? And that's here, but they do a really good job of interspersing it with like complex human emotion and the stuff that you would get from like more melodic music, which I really liked, and really stood out as being kind of the first time I've seen that combination. I was trying to see like it, with us covering like people like Portishead and Bjork. Bjork has a little bit of that too, like humanizing like synthetic sounds, but Bjork's kind of like her own thing, right? And she's very closely tied more to like that club and like jungle, music culture, which is its own thing, which is dance music. This does not stand alone as dance. You can dance to this, but it doesn't seem to be designed to be dance music. It seems to be more designed to be music that sort of you play in a space, right? And like you kind of come to it. That's the Frenchness of it, right? Like there's like an existential quality to the sound of this, which I really appreciate. So before I go too far into the weeds there, I'll turn it over to Matt so he can kind of jump in here too. But thumbs up. Like, let me say that. I hate the album title, though. Emperor Tomato Ketchup's terrible. But the album itself, thumbs up. And probably, actually not probably, definitely my pick of the week.
Yeah, I was not expecting this. It's Stereolab, again, name of a band I've been aware of. And I was just, I don't know, I was thinking more of like a, I don't know, like an LCD sound system before LCD sound system. Yeah. Just like the name kind of is, lends itself to kind of this electronic. And this is an electronic record. But to me, I mean, in addition to the krautrock, vibes here, this is late 60s psychedelic music here, rock music here, with some experimental stuff. Like I was thinking of the United States of America, and I was thinking of Os Mutantes as well. Like I think you mentioned Brazilian music, Josh. It's kind of like this, it's kind of like a time machine, going back into a time machine, listening to this record. This does not sound like the 90s at all. This sounds very much in the lane of some of that late 60s stuff, and some of the stuff is kind of like music you would see like in an Austin Powers, montage or whatever, right? But also with that, you've got some really interesting choices in terms of time signatures. Like a song like Tomorrow Is Already Here, which is kind of like this, it's a little bit of a droning song, and it's just got two musical parts that are going off different beats, and when they're played together, it's like, I was trying to do this in my head. I was like, okay, it's going beat, 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 kind of like that, but then the other part was doing that same thing, but doing it in different time, like doing two when the other was doing one, going on the offbeat. And the way that it kind of came together, it was just like, it's one of those things where it reminded me almost like of a Genesis song where, like the end of Supper's Ready, when you're trying to figure out what's going on. Like it's so offbeat. It's so like the time signature is so wonky that it's hard to really kind of figure out where's the measure start, where does the beat start, and stuff like that. It's kind of like it's hard to wrap your brain around. And when you finally do, you're like, oh, it's just cool, right? And it's not something that most bands or musicians are able to do or even try to do. So I thought it did a great job of melding something that was more avant-garde. So it's definitely avant pop, right? Like that's there too. But then there's some poppier elements too, like what is it? The Noise of Carpet is a very kind of more of a straight ahead kind of a pop song, right? And so that one stood out to me as well. But yeah, this was longer. I think this was probably the shortest one. This one's actually under an hour. So that's probably extra points for being a little brevity is kind of entering the realm here. But yeah, thrown for a loop here. This seems to me to belong more in the 60s, but I like hearing it now, right? It's kind of like, when you're hearing so many different things, and this is something that kind of came out of left field a little bit. It was a nice surprise, but it was very interesting. What took a lot of different curves. Every song was different. I didn't ever lose interest in this, and it got better as I listened to it. And it made me want to listen to more Stereolab. So I can't give a more, ringing endorsement than that. It was my album of the week as well, and I'm thumbs up.
Great.
Good stuff. Well, and I think we do revisit Stereolab one other time, a little bit later. Yep. So okay. I think we will see them one more time, and I look forward to it because I'm curious to see where they sort of move to in their next album, because this did sound different than Ping Pong. So